It's that time again for one of my favorite things we do, where we really do learn about a whole bunch of different things that happen in the spirits industry, because so much goes into making the things that we love, the bourbon and the whiskey. And we have someone that's going to provide a different perspective, I think, this time around. She's the director of the Dindry Fund, past chair co founder of the White Oak Initiative, and she's also a sustainability innovation leader at Brown-Forman. Let's welcome in Barbara Hunt.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm I'm good. You have a lot of things you're doing these days. How do you make sure you keep all that straight?
Well, that's a great question. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
but but I feel like they all do go together, which that's probably a good thing. And we'll get into kind of what the White Oak Initiative is, kind of what your role is with Brown Foreman, and how all those combine. But for those unfamiliar, you know, they might see the bottle at the end of the day and get to enjoy the juice in the bottle. But there's a starting point, and really all this starts with wood that is used for those bourbon barrels. So can you kind of explain where the majority of that wood comes from, and how that process begins?
Sure. So American white oak grows primarily in the eastern part of the United States. If you're not technically memorizing the map, you just kind of fold the United States in half, and it's on the east side of that. This is a pretty special area, pretty special region, as white oak, as we'll talk about, brings a lot of things to social, economic, and environmental outcomes and benefit. It is sourced across that entire region, north to south, east to west, up to that middle line.
And like you said, that white oak then really does become the barrel. They get cut up into staves, become a bourbon barrel, and we're making a lot of bourbon barrels these days, right?
Yes, I think that's definitely good for the industry, and I think good for people's palates.
Absolutely. And because of that, though, I believe that's probably how the White Oak Initiative came to be. So can you explain how that started, why, and what the White Oak Initiative is?
Sure. Actually, the White Oak Initiative started a long time ago, all the way back in the 80s. So, University of Kentucky is one of the co-founders of the White Oak Initiative, alongside American Forest Foundation and Dender Fund. And we kicked it off in 2017, but it was all the way back in the 80s that researchers were noticing a decline in regeneration of white oak on the forest floor. As trends continued, people started paying more attention to that, getting more questions about why and how do we keep white oak in the forest in the abundance that we have. So, when I first came to that conversation, we actually went out, a group of Dender Fund board members went out and went on a walk with the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association. So we were curious what landowners, forest landowners, were thinking about in their forest. What did they want in a healthy forest? And what was the work that they were thinking about and partners that they were working with. So on that trip all the way back in 2016, we heard about white oak and white oak regeneration as from the 80s. That was about, let's see, let's do some quick math, 30, 40 years. Kind of watching that decline over time. White oak was definitely the conversation on that day. And so what we had found was that a lot of people were doing work on this. As I had mentioned, University of Kentucky had really started pulling together more formal conversations to get landowners thinking about the value of white oak on their land. And one of the things that we often talk about is, it's as I sit here in Louisville, Kentucky, in a more suburban area. Not, there's a lot of trees, but not forest. Understanding the connection to the forest really can be challenging if you're not in the forest every day, and most people aren't. So as we're talking about white oak regeneration and how can we get more people involved, it's pretty the connection is pretty quick when you explain to them that white oak regeneration isn't happening, and then you say, why does that matter? Well, it matters to your bourbon. So that conversation is really where forest landowners were starting to think about white oak decline in on their land. Conservationists were thinking about the decline of white oak for wildlife, water benefit, and also how can the land be managed in a way to regenerate that and reverse the trends in the decline. And then obviously, as you had mentioned, the bourbon industry is and whiskey industry is very dependent on white oak. And so how can we help really lift that conversation up and bring awareness when we can do that with great brands like Old Forester, Woodford Reserve, and Jack Daniels to say, you want more of this? Let's all get together and make sure we have it in the future by pulling together to think about what we can do collectively.
Well, and that's what you guys have been able to do, like you said, over formally over the last, half decade or almost decade now. But like you said, the research has been going on for a long time. But what is the ultimate goal for the initiative then, and kind of what are you guys able to do right now?
Yeah, so the goal is pretty big. When we kicked the White Oak Initiative off in 2017, we had a group of people from all different perspectives related to white oak to ask the question and put a plan together of what does success look like. And from 2017 to when we published the assessment and conservation plan in 2021, we really thought about that. What are the action plans to get to a larger goal? And the goal was set for 50 years from, I'm not sure what the exact starting point, I think 2070. Again, do some math on that one. But by 2070, we want to ensure that there's a healthy balance of white oak in the forest. So what you see right now is you have a lot of mature trees and then a lot of smaller trees. But the balance that's really important is to ensure that we have mid-story trees as well, so that the cycle will continue to regenerate and in a normal system. So the goal of getting to a balanced white oak forest by 50 years is a pretty big one because that includes 100 million acres. So there's about 104 million acres counted out there. And we're looking to ensure that we're all keeping the white oak in that forest.
Well, and as you touched on this, yes, it is hugely important for bourbon barrels, whiskey barrels. Oaks kind of you got to put it in a brand new oak barrel, but this impact goes well beyond that. And like you said, whether it's the climate, the environment, it has such a wide impact on everything the white oak does.
Yeah, it really does. But again, as I mentioned, when we kicked this off, we brought a really wide group of stakeholders together, and that included not only industry. So we've talked a little bit about, white oak is the only wood that will make a barrel and hold liquid in. So the bourbon industry and whiskey makers use white oak for theirs, for their products. And then we also have conservationists. So the Wild Turkey Federation, again, mentioned American Forest Foundation, as well as state forestry agencies, academia, mentioned University of Kentucky, all coming together because of that social, economic, and environmental benefit that everyone has a little bit of dependency or connection to white oak in some capacity. And so it's really a species that when you manage a forest for white oak, you manage for the health of the full forest.
When I was reading up on it, it's amazing that the impact that that one tree really does
Mhm.
have on so on so much, because it can do a little bit more than maybe some other trees when it comes to carbon impact, things like that. Like it really blew my mind that yes, like I said, it makes a whiskey turn really good, but it really does a lot for us in general.
Yeah, well, and I had never thought about the habitat that it provides as well. So, we'll think about forests are where our healthy water, our waters start to clean and hold the soil in place. And so, that is something I think about typically. I think about the acorns and acorn production. So it's really valuable and it's a favorite food for deer and turkey and different wildlife that I might typically think about. But I hadn't, until I started getting more into this, realized that it's also a really important habitat. So there are endangered bats that roost in the bark, as well as over 500 pollinators prefer white oak as a place to call home. So there are a lot of things when we think about users of white oak. Again, the whiskey and bourbon industry stand out. Yet, when you think about all of those pollinators, all of those animals, we might just be some of the smaller users out there as well.
Well, and as, if folks remember, a lot more goes into whiskey than just the barrel too, and those pollinators are a huge benefit to producing the corn and different grains that go with it. So, like you said, it has a huge impact. And if people want to find out more about this initiative, or maybe even become involved, or show their support, what can they do, and how can they do that?
So the White Oak Initiative has a website. It's whiteoakinitiative.org. Go to the website. It's just been newly updated with a lot of different resources for landowners. There's a large list you can look up by your state where you can find different resources to manage your land. You can also contact the executive director of the White Oak Initiative, Jason Meyer, to get engaged from donation, donations and support from, again, managing your land, from spreading the word. I might even suggest the next time you pick up a bottle of Old Forester, think about the forest and, make a toast to your friends for the future of white oak, just to get the conversation going and spread the word a little bit as well.
I completely agree, and folks, I highly recommend you checking that out. Like I said, I learned a lot, and I guess I'm going to wrap it up on this because we've talked about the importance, but the amount of different people that probably truly do have a little bit of a different interest in everything that came together to make this happen has to be pretty cool to see and amazing to see that so folks from so many different outlets came together to make sure that this amazing tree keeps moving forward.
Yeah, it is really exciting to see the groundswell of interest and work that's being done. So most recently, there has also been, I had mentioned the assessment conservation plan that was put out in 2021, where everyone really started thinking about what is the action that we need to take to get to that 50-year goal. That also sparked a lot of conversation in the in on Capitol Hill. That a White Oak Caucus started. The White Oak Resiliency Act was introduced, and just a couple weeks ago was passed through the House and then introduced into the Senate. So one of the things that I talked about when we kicked it off, the coalition and the groups that are dependent on white oak, this is really a species that is beloved across all perspectives, and our hope is that it will continue through the Senate to unlock a lot of resources that weren't available before for landowners to get access to different resources to manage their land. So it's truly heartening to see the groundswell of not just on the ground, what I can do in my own yard, my own property, my own evening toast with the friends, all the way up to just a really large effort going on in DC to help make sure that we have this really great species in our American forest well into the future and in abundance.
I couldn't agree more. Like you said, it's truly amazing to see the work that's gone into it. But like you said, a lot of work still ahead of us. And if folks want to get involved, White Oak Initiative and Barbara, thanks for sharing the story behind the initiative, but also the importance of a tree that, like we said, touches so many of us.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for continuing to share the word. I guess if anyone has podcasts, that's another thing you can do. So thank you for that today.